Well, hey everybody, it's Chuck. Welcome back. We're in the AI4 Model Y today, and I figured we'd just do another little drive along, mostly because we got another subject to talk about. This is going to be about Starship's rapid unscheduled disassembly, RUD, yesterday. What a fabulous launch and catch of the booster. A very kind of unfortunate disassembly of the ship, but at the same time, Starship is iterating so fast. This was a Block 2 Starship that had never been flown before with all the changes, and it just is unfortunate how it happened. But what I want to talk about today, and kind of the title of this podcast today, or video, if you're watching it visually, is, the rapid unscheduled disassembly, the RUD of Starship 7 from a pilot's perspective. And when I say a pilot's perspective, I'm talking about, had I been a pilot flying yesterday with a destination of Turks and Caicos from Boston, for example, a very common route this time of year. There's a lot of people up north that love to get out of the cold and go down to the islands, and it's actually a fairly busy route structure this time of year. But I wanted to just kind of talk about kind of the sequence of events, how it works, what a pilot might be thinking, and then kind of the circumstance of the RUD actually happening, and then what transpired from the perspective of had I been airborne. And first of all, I want to say this was a safe maneuver. I do believe that everything was done right, and I think SpaceX and the FAA and everyone deserves a lot of credit for having done the work ahead of time. And honestly, this is why these exclusion zones are created for this incident. Obviously, space travel has had incidents in the past, and this is not a first occurrence of this. Fortunately, this was an unmanned vehicle, and there was no loss of life, to anyone, of course, on the ship. I do want to just highlight here, we do have a biker here, and look how the Model Y is doing an amazing job, and look at it giving room, but it needed to wait to give room until we got a little bit of visibility around this corner, and then right around the corner, smoothly transitioning back. The Model Y is just so much smoother than the Cybertruck. So in any case, let's get back to the Starship launch and what happened, and perhaps the sequence of events. As you all know, if you watch any of these launches, and if you're listening to this podcast or video, you probably recognize that there's exclusion zones very close to the launch area that are keep out zones. Matter of fact, before flight yesterday, you probably saw that helicopter that was landing down there in front of the pad and refueling. That helicopter's job is to make sure there is no one in that red warning zone, which is right off of the coast, that is effectively a danger zone. And that would be what we call restricted airspace. No one's allowed in that area, either in the air or on water. And there's some maps, and if I can get an image, I'll show you here, of the red warning areas and then the hazard zones a little bit further down that are marked in yellow on this map. These areas are underneath the trajectory, underneath the flight path of ship, and essentially can be activated. The yellow ones are areas that are not restricted, but are essentially warning zones. These are annotated to airmen and also probably mariners via NOTAMs. Notice to airmen is what they're called. They're tiny little text bullets that pilots get before every single flight that honestly are the I don't want to say the bane of our existence, but they basically frustrate the heck out of us when we fly, because we have to read every single one of these notes and understand them and how they might impact our flight. Okay, I just want to point out here, I'm down here near the Florida Yacht Club, and I've re-entered a route here, and I've got, it looks like we got a food truck, we've got a construction van here, the car is going to need to do a U-turn to get back around, and I've already given it a route to do this. So this should be kind of interesting to watch. But as we're sitting here, I'm going to pick up this NOTAM trip here in a second. I'm just going to kind of keep on adding some points in here. I'm probably going to get Chuck, pay attention to the road. Notice here in a second. That guy pulled off. I got a pedestrian to the right. He's not showing any trajectories. Try to get this route all in here for you guys. Pay attention to the road, Chuck. Oh, so, okay, I would go right. Is it going to go right? Oh God, it's going to go all the way to, okay, now we're fighting with the food truck here, construction truck, and he's going around. It might get itself in a bind here. I don't know. All right, this is the parking lot up here. If it does a 3-point turn and get itself out of here, oh, it's going to do it, isn't it? Look at this. Come on. Give me some reverse. Come on. You can do it, Model Y. You can do it. Come on, Possum. You're stuck. Well, shucks. I thought it was going to be able to use reverse here. I don't know. See how it's in hurry mode? When these speed profiles are listed, you can't actually reverse. So I should have noticed that. I'm going to go back into standard here. I'm going to go ahead and give it the its way out here, and then we'll re-engage it. So if you didn't notice, when those speed profiles are being shown, it can't use reverse. It's kind of, and we don't, it's got something to do with destinations and routes and things like that. I'm just going to re-engage as soon as it's available, and it should proceed on. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so I think we're good now. We're headed towards Stockton Park. Okay, so back to NOTAMs. Notice to airmen are how we're notified of temporary changes, right? So we know our route of flights. We know that there might be a hazard. So a NOTAM might be given to a pilot to say a runway is closed. Might be given to say the airport closes at an unusual time. In this situation, there were NOTAMs for certain latitudes and longitudes that defined the hazard and even the warning areas, the warning zones that Starship created. Now, these NOTAMs have windows of time, right? And these windows of time are basically to accommodate the launch windows that SpaceX and or any, okay, we got a truck here. He's backing up. And look at this. Did I give him enough room? Where is he going? He's got a good angle. He's going for it, but I don't know. Man, what is he doing here? He's going straight back. Is the car going to take it? Gosh, that was crazy good. It got a little closer than I would have, but that's how it played out. I didn't touch anything. So these time zones are essentially to accommodate the launch window. So you say, well, if the SpaceX launch was going to happen at 4 p.m. Central Time, 5 p.m. Eastern Time, then the amount of flight time to get into each of those exclusion zones, you add the flight time, and then this is the window. Well, if you remember yesterday, they also delayed the launch from 4 to 4:37 or so, and that is obviously within the window. So as an airline, when we schedule flights, you know exactly what time you're supposed to take off, but then the time you actually take off based on taxi delays and those other sort of things can affect your airborne time. But if I was going to be flying from Boston down to Turks and Caicos, that might be like a 4-hour flight en route. I'm doing that off the top of my head. I haven't flown that route in a long time. And if I took off, at, let's just say 1 p.m. in Boston, I'm scheduled to land or so, around 5 p.m. Eastern time, even though Turks and Caicos, I believe, is in Atlantic time, and that timeline creates. And now I have a decision with my dispatcher, and I'm going to come back to that dispatcher point in a second, to make a decision about how I'm going to deal with that NOTAM. Now, that NOTAM might cover the entire island of the Turks and Caicos. And if I'm going to take off today, I have to fly into that warning zone, even though it's NOTAMed as in an area around the rocket launch. So the dispatcher, and my dispatcher in Part 121 operations, and that's essentially scheduled domestic service in the United States. If you fly for a charter company, or if you fly for your general aviation, you own your own airplane, you're not governed by the regulations of the FAA under Part 121. But in Part 121, the pilot and the dispatcher have a shared responsibility to plan that flight. In most commercial aviation, the dispatcher is the primary person determining the route of the flight, the amount of fuel you need, based on how many passengers you have that day, based on the luggage you're probably carrying that day, based on the wind, the temperature, and all of the different things that affect your aircraft's efficiency. Even choosing the altitude that we fly at that day to perhaps find a better wind component to help us give a tailwind or less of a headwind. So that dispatcher, probably 3 or 4 hours before flight, made a decision that, okay, we understand there's a NOTAM. We're going to go ahead and fly into that area, but we're going to maybe add a little bit of extra fuel because if something happened, we need to be able to divert, we need to be able to hold, we need to be able to handle some contingencies for that fuel. This is not unlike planning for weather. There might be thunderstorms in the East Coast, so in case we run into any of those unexpected storms, we're going to give a little extra fuel if we can carry it on the plane. Continuing to edit my route while I talk to you guys. And that route essentially is now giving me a trajectory as the airline captain of that specific flight to say I'm going from here to here, and I will be along this route at any point in time after my takeoff time kind of makes it solid in stone. So when Starship was delayed by 37 minutes, the Starship's arrival over that point and my aircraft's arrival over that point now may or may not intersect like they were during the planning process. So more than likely, in most of these scenarios, the airlines are just going to fly. We have to fly to maintain our schedule because our schedule is a contract with our customers about departing at a certain time and arriving at a certain time. And it's a little bit difficult to delay something for a rocket launch. You don't do that. There's planning around it. There's things you do to essentially manage the schedule as best you can with extra fuel, and possibly sometimes even have to take passengers off so your plane is light enough to carry that extra fuel. Okay, I think we've gone far enough into the NOTAM process, and you're kind of starting to understand the trajectories through space are now, planned to intersect with each other. I'm going to be arriving at Turks and Caicos at the same time Starship is going to be overhead Turks and Caicos, hopefully on a good day where nothing happens. This is the best case scenario, and many times a pilot might not even know that there's a rocket launch because that NOTAM was buried in thousands of different NOTAMs. An experienced pilot or a prudent pilot will use certain tools to filter the most important NOTAMs, but I will tell you, it is physically impossible to read all of them and consume what they're telling you in that time frame. Now, like I said, we do share that responsibility with our dispatcher, and the combination of the pilot and the dispatcher are pretty much in tune with all of the limitations of the flight. I have those NOTAMs with me during the entire course of flight. I read them and review them. As I'm going into a destination, I reread the NOTAMs about where I'm going. Perhaps I wasn't consuming the information about my landing airport when I was taking off, and I have time to do that while in the air. Okay, so now Starship takes off, and it has a great launch, and now we kind of know the trajectory, and now I'm going to bring in the other partner we have in aviation, and this is air traffic control. Our air traffic controller brothers and sisters, they're the ones that give us directions in the sky, manage us on instrument flight plans so that we don't get too close to each other. They give us nice radio calls. They give us radio frequency changes. If we're going to pass within 1,000 feet of another aircraft, they typically tell us to look in a certain direction so we can see that aircraft and maintain separation if something should go wrong. They are essentially the people in the air that are managing the airspace real time and the aircraft that are flying through that airspace in real time. So the air traffic controllers are the ones that are listening on the back radios or hearing things that might be happening with SpaceX, right? There is no communication with a pilot to SpaceX to know that there has been a rocket explosion. None. That we would have no idea. So now you think of the timely communication required between ATC, the FAA, and of course the launch director and SpaceX during these launches. Because at the moment that SpaceX suspected there was a problem, they must have had to tell the FAA and subsequently the air traffic controllers, we expect that we've lost ship. While we were watching those videos and wondering if we lost ship, I guarantee you that SpaceX has already told the FAA something has gone wrong, because that time is so important for closing of the airspace, redirecting of aircraft if required, and evaluating the actual keep out zones that are now warning zones that we can't let you in because now there's debris that's possibly falling, right? So as soon as SpaceX was afraid something had happened, they probably communicated in real time with the FAA. The FAA contacted what's called the command center. The command center is in Washington, D.C. area. The command center redistributed and probably spoke to the controllers that were responsible for that airspace that moment and said, the SpaceX hazard zone is now a warning zone. It's a keep out zone. So we went from theoretically a yellow area to a red area. That is when things happen. And now as an aircraft, I'm now no longer allowed to fly through it like I had planned. I have to either go around it, but of course, because it was this long, elongated polygon, there was no going around it. You either had to hold outside of that area, or you had to divert and turn back around and go back to a destination, or another alternate airport, as we call it. If you've ever been on a plane and you heard the captain come on and said, we have to divert for fuel, that just means something happened that was unexpected, and we got to go to a safe location to get some fuel so we can continue our flight. Granted, you might have to land. It might take a little bit longer, but that's kind of what was happening there. So imagine you're a passenger on this plane, and I was the captain that day, and SpaceX had talked to the command center, and command center had talked to my air traffic controller, and then I'm flying along at 7 miles up at around 39,000 feet, and ATC comes on and says, I'm not going to use my airline's name, but Captain Chuck, you need to hold in your current position. Estimated further clearance time is in 1 hour. Estimated further clearance time is a time that they give a pilot to say, I don't really know how long you're going to hold, but I'm going to give you a clearance that you're going to expect another clearance in this time. And it might have been an hour, it might have been a half an hour. I don't know what they told those crews that day. So at that moment is my first, something's going on. And I might not even know why. If the air traffic controller had the information, he might have said there's been a SpaceX, something. You no longer can enter this area. I might not even know where that area is because I hadn't plotted it on my chart. I would have to go back to the NOTAM and look at the actual latitudes and longitudes and draw a polygon on my map. I really don't know. I'm just listening to air traffic control to tell me where I can and can't go at that moment. But as soon as I get a position in space to hold, I start doing math with my first officer. I look at my total fuel on board. I look at how far we have to go to our destination. I calculate the amount of fuel I'm going to burn if I have to actually hold for an hour. And if I hold for an hour, can I then continue to the airport or another alternate and safely land with probably one extra approach in case something happens on landing? All of this happens in a matter of minutes to quickly determine what I'm going to do as the captain of that flight. Because air traffic control doesn't know how much fuel I have, really. They don't know my situation and my weight that day. So as soon as I got holding instructions, I'm determining how much fuel I have and what I need to do. And let's just say on this day, I have enough fuel to hold for 30 minutes. And we decide we're going to hold for 30 minutes, and after 30 minutes, we're either going to our destination or we're going to our alternate. And when you looked at those maps on Flight Radar 24 yesterday, and you saw some aircraft doing some racetrack patterns, that's what they were doing. They were holding in the air based on a certain amount of time they had calculated for the fuel they had. Okay, so let's say that 30 minutes goes by, and air traffic control says, yeah, sorry, the airspace is still closed for some reason. I probably would divert back to the north somewhere. Maybe I would have gone back to Key West, or Miami or Fort Lauderdale, or maybe I would go to San Juan, Puerto Rico, or somewhere within a reasonable distance that I could get to with the fuel I had. If at that initial situation, I looked at my fuel and I said, whoa, I can't hold for an hour, I'm going to go ahead and just divert now. That might have been the reason some of those aircraft immediately diverted. They were not told to divert by ATC. They were probably told how long they might have to wait, and then they made the decision to divert based on the fuel and the situation they had. Now, there's a couple unknowns here that I'm just speculating on how long they might have asked those crews to hold based on the trajectory of the Starship. Now, I want to tell you that when Starship delayed itself by 30 minutes, and then the instant that it might have RUD'd, which SpaceX was probably speculating at a little bit too, they have to calculate the trajectory of the debris field in real time and pass that along to ATC. More than likely, they didn't do that amount of math in real time. They just said, treat our keep out zone as the zone, don't let anybody in it, because we don't know exactly when that debris field will be entering that airspace. So we're just not gonna let anybody go in there. So they probably buffer it by a little bit. So now I'm gonna give you a little bit of mental math and let you understand why this was probably as safe as it really was. Most modern aircraft fly at a maximum of 41,000 feet. Some commercial aircraft, some Gulfstreams, they can go way higher than that, up in the 50s and sometimes 60s. But most commercial aircraft that you would ever buy a ticket on are flying up to 41,000 feet. That's about 7 miles up in the air. Okay, I went back and looked at the moment that we lost telemetry data on the SpaceX video, and the aircraft was at about 145 kilometers altitude. That is 500,000 feet of altitude, or 90 miles up. So if an airliner is flying at its maximum altitude of 90, and something blew up at 7, and something blew up at 90, while it may be a beautiful sight in the sky, there is a lot of distance between that flying, burning stainless steel and me. A little bit of a conversation here, crossing pedestrian, a couple here, we're turning right into the cul-de-sac. He's kind of going slowly, and this car is treating it beautifully. I'm gonna come in here and get ready to delete the point, and we'll do our FSD return here at the end and let the Model Y figure out how to get us back. Deleting that point, FSD return done. Okay, so Starship blew up at 90 miles of altitude. The aircraft are flying at 7 miles of altitude. So there's a lot of airspace in there. I will tell you, as a pilot looking up at the sky, seeing those things streak through, I can't tell it's at 90 miles. I can say it's way above me. Probably knew it was at least 20 miles above me, but would I have guessed 90? I'm going to say no, because Starship is so large and that debris field was so large. Did you see that reverse maneuver? Flawless. It looks closer than it is. So while there was no immediate danger, there might have been concern. There might have been like, I don't know where that stainless steel is falling. The pilots didn't realize that the vehicle was going 21,000 kilometers an hour at the time, Mach 20. So those stainless steel fragments are, transonic, going super duper fast, which is why they were so hot, but they're falling. Now, granted, if I were to see those things streaking through the sky like a meteor, I could probably in my mind go, okay, that's going to fall somewhere over there. It's not going to hit me. But I also can't, in my mind, calculate gravity. I can't calculate, like Kerbal Space Program might be able to calculate trajectories in real time. I'm sitting there going, I don't know where that's falling. I just don't want to go anywhere near it. Now, if you could imagine a piece of stainless steel that might have been flying through the air at 90 miles up, burning itself up and falling down, and let's just say most of it burned up. But if there was a tiny little piece the size of my hand traveling anywhere near the terminal velocity of stainless steel that didn't burn up, and it hit the aluminum skin of an aircraft, it's going to go straight through it. So it's a scary mental thought of airborne shrapnel to possibly hit a plane. So in no way, shape, form, or fashion do I want to risk the aircraft or anything like that going anywhere near that. I'm probably going to divert. I'm going to hold. We're going to follow our instructions. But just realize that the size of this debris field was a calculated debris field that hopefully had enough buffers so we knew exactly where it was and where it was going to fall. But SpaceX did not know where it was going to fall until after they knew it blew up, and they did the calculations of how that debris field might fall to Earth and then where it was. Now, the fact we saw these, burning pieces of metal over Turks and Caicos, and that's one of the most eastern pieces of land that we fly to, and it was 90 miles in the air, more than likely it was out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean where very few aircraft or ships should be. Now, that doesn't mean there's none, but obviously there should have been few. So what we call the big sky theory. The chance of me hitting anything or it hitting anything in the water were small. But this is what's happening in real time before anybody really even knows anything. And as you and I were sitting there watching our videos from home or wherever you were yesterday, there's aircraft that are already turning around based off of the speed of information that had to happen in order to protect those areas for what was possible, not what was likely to happen. Does that make sense? So there just wasn't enough time to go, the debris field will be right here. They just had to very quickly protect the airspace, turn the aircraft around, and stop the aircraft from going through there because there just wasn't time for the calculations. I hope that makes sense, because this is how we are able to do high-risk maneuvers in aviation together, is because while we cannot make it safe, completely safe, meaning there is zero risk, what we do is we create mitigations so that inherently dangerous maneuvers can be managed with risk mitigation. And that is what that keep out zone was. That was what the communication channels with the FAA and ATC were. That is ultimately what the aircraft and crew were doing when they were managing their fuel, planning their alternate, and determining how long they could fly. Those were all mitigations to manage an inherently dangerous maneuver. And everything in life, you could argue if you don't want to get hurt today, then just stay in bed. So all humans manage risk by things they do. I don't want to cut my foot. I'm going to put on a shoe. I don't want to, get hurt today. So I'm going to wear gloves with my hands. All these things are mitigations, and humans do this every single day. I'm just describing in aviation how we take it to another level. Very nice maneuver. Guys, I haven't done anything with the Model Y. It's just really, really good. That one would not reverse back at the yacht club was because it was in hurry mode, probably because of the way my destinations were set up. Okay, so I hope the risk mitigation, conversation helps you understand how airlines do this. We think about what could go wrong. We plan for it. We have entire teams at airlines that assign risk points based on the certain types of risk, and it's just built into our operation. We don't even have to think about doing these things because our processes, all the way back to the dispatcher that's planning that flight that day, to the pilot when he showed up and saw his flight plan 1 hour prior, to the amount of fuel they put on the plane that day, to the amount of passengers we carried, everything is managed through a process to manage risk through mitigations. So I didn't end that little conversation exactly how I wanted, but that's kind of the point I wanted to get at is if you're a passenger, you shouldn't be worried about situations like happened today. It was completely safe because of the processes put in place to manage the risk. Now, if you were a passenger on that flight and then you started holding and the captain didn't have enough information to tell you why you were holding, and next thing you know, you're diverting back to San Juan or Fort Lauderdale, and you're not going to, Turks and Caicos, and your Airbnb is going to be ready, and you're worried about all these things. This doesn't change any of that. You as a customer still have to deal with the inconvenience of what happened today as part of, SpaceX's plan. You as a customer may be angry. You may have lost money. I don't know what could have happened, but there are things that happen every single day that when a scheduled air carrier can't get you at your certain time, something happens. You lose a rental, your chauffeur, your driver, wasn't there anymore because you never showed up when you were supposed to. All these things are inconveniences, but they're inconveniences that were ultimately made in order to keep you safe and make the right decisions. And as a captain, I do my best to communicate effectively to customers on our planes. I try to give as much information as I can without scaring you. And I say that very deliberately, without scaring you. There's sometimes information I may have, if I'm very articulate and very specific as to what happened, you might not like to hear what I said. Let me give you an example. So if we're delayed at the gate and I tried to start an engine and the engine didn't start because of something like maybe a fuel filter or something like that. But if I come over the PA, the announcement system, and just tell the customers, yeah, we had an engine problem, we're going to go back to the gate and get it fixed and we're leaving right away, you as a customer might be like, what, our engines? We can't take off with these engines. But me as the pilot, I know exactly what it is, but I just didn't effectively communicate to you that there was a problem that was of no consequence with our engines. So in that situation, I would have said something like, hey, we're heading back to the gate to just get a little small maintenance item fixed. It should take a few minutes and we'll be underway and getting you your destination safely and as quickly as possible. I don't need to tell you everything as long as I'm not scaring you about things that you shouldn't need to be worried about. There are all sorts of flyers out there. Some of them can't stand the smallest little bump, and some of them are seasoned and will sleep right through an announcement about an engine failure. That's just the way the experience base is in the back of a plane. But that's the way we essentially learn to communicate with our customers to not scare you as much about things that are of little consequence. So if I was coming on the PA trying to describe why we're going around, if I knew specifically that there had been a rocket explosion, I probably wouldn't have used those words to tell you why we're going back to San Juan. I probably wouldn't have said there was a rocket explosion, we're heading to San Juan. I would have probably said, air traffic control has closed the airspace in front of us for something that was scheduled. And we don't have enough fuel to go to our destination with the instructions that air traffic control has given us. So we're going to go get some more fuel. We're going to make sure everything's safe, and we're going to get you to your destination as quickly and safely as possible. And that's how it would have ended. You might have gotten to Turks and Caicos a little bit later, but you'd have gotten there safe, and then you'd have watched the news, and you'd have said, I was in the air when that happened. And then you'd have understood exactly what was going on. There is an interesting dynamic on modern aircraft, specifically our aircraft and many others, is we have real-time internet. And more than likely, even if you weren't somebody watching that SpaceX launch, there was somebody on that plane watching the SpaceX launch and knew exactly what had happened in real time. And that rumor would have spread through that cabin as quickly as possible. It may have just been a whisper from one row to the next, and before you know it, within a matter of 2 or 3 minutes, everybody probably knew that they were going back to San Juan or Fort Lauderdale because of a SpaceX launch that didn't go as planned. So the advent of the internet does change the speed of information, even on aircraft today. That's not always a good thing. Sometimes information can go back to that scary zone where it scares passengers if they're given information through non-official channels and the right words aren't used. It can get a little scary. It's just something to consider. Okay, I think I have talked nonstop now and described this about as best as I could of how those airspace closures from a pilot's perspective might have played out, give you a little bit of context into the airspace, the people involved, the time scales involved, and how we manage risk to make these operations as safe as possible. It works. It's a very safe system. There is no aviation system in the world as safe as ours here in the United States, and globally they are all almost as safe as ours. I'm not going to pull out statistics and say we're up there, but if you look at the safety record, it's actually unbelievable that we are able to be as safe as we are, which is a testament to the processes, procedures, the regulations, and the regulators that help us stay in our lane and fly safe, scheduled operations. In any case, I hope you enjoyed this content. Just kind of another chat with Chuck here on my podcast kind of format. If you're watching the video, thanks for that. I hopefully got some engaging video for you to watch the Model Y do what was basically an intervention-free drive with the exception of that reverse maneuver at the beginning. I haven't done anything but edit the route. The Model Y is just so solid right now. And this is on FSD version 13.2.2, right? So it's actually a 0.2 behind the Cybertruck, but the Cybertruck just is not as smooth as this Model Y. I will be very nervous to take another version of software on top of this unless they really add some cool features like the 3x model scaling and those other things that we know are coming. But in any case, hopefully that'll happen soon. Anyway, leave some comments below. Let me know what you think about this format. I'm still feeding off of you guys' comments and feedback both in the podcast and the video and on X. And hopefully you enjoy it. If you think I missed the mark on this, let me know below. If you think I explained it well and gave you a little bit more context, let me know that as well. Let's have a conversation about this. And nice job to SpaceX with that booster catch yesterday. And we know you'll get back to the drawing books and figure out what happened with Ship and hopefully launch very, very soon. Have a great day, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.